All right, we may be like 30 seconds early, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Future of Entertainment, VR Story Architects and Experience Designers. I had to read that from here. It's a long sentence. We have a great lineup for you guys today, and I don't want to spend a ton of time giving you the whole thing, but I do want to figure out, just want to get a general idea of where the audience is as far as virtual reality and 360 video. So if you are working or have worked on any sort of VR or 360 production, or you work in the business, can you just raise your hand for me? Okay, okay, good majority of people. Is there anyone who has no idea what 360 video or virtual reality is? Okay, all right, this guy over here. All right, great. And then the rest of you have some you're familiar, but you're not necessarily working on it. Okay, great. That helps us to know, like, we're mostly working with people who understand the business and understand some of the some of the technology and some of the limitations and some of the exciting things that have even happened even recently. So I'm going to introduce the panel here. So closest to me, this is Dylan Roberts. He's the co-founder and CEO of Freelance Society. It's a multimedia production company and 360 studio based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and London, two very different places. At the age of 18, Dylan began traveling internationally as a journalist and videographer to countries including Iraq, Lebanon, Cuba, Uganda, Gaza, Somalia, and beyond. He started creating 360 videos in early 2015, such as Welcome to Aleppo, Their World, Safe School, Nepal, and On the Front Line with Medics in Mosul, Iraq. Next to him, we have Najib Kuda. He's the founder and CEO of the award-winning production company Endless Media and its VR content studio, Endless VR. He's got some great stuff to show us today. Next to him, we have Madison Girafalco. Got it? All right. The art director at VR Player House and independent writer-illustrator. She worked as a creative executive for an indie production company for a number of years. But within 3 months of seeing her first VR experience, she quit her job in film development and started transitioning to telling stories using VR. I think many of us probably did that. Alongside her VR work, alongside VR Playhouse, Madison led the digital marketing and social media for the past VRLA Expo. So some of you guys were there. She led the marketing and social media for that. Madison also works at 14th Factory and is currently looking to publish a children's book, which she wrote and illustrated. And then we have Thomas Wallner. He's an Emmy award-winning innovator, filmmaker, and interactive media creator. He is the founder of two companies, Deep Inc., a Toronto-based cinematic VR studio, and Liquid Cinema Inc., a software company building tools to help creators explore and define the evolving language of cinematic VR. And my name is Alex Pierce. I will be the moderator for the panel today. I'm filling in for Celine Tricart. Some of you guys know her. She had to go take a VR gig in Turkey, so she got out of it. But I have a background in traditional filmmaking. Like Madison, my first VR experience, I literally the next day changed everything I was doing and started focusing on VR. That was about 3 years ago. Last September, I joined Jaunt VR as a full-time producer and director. I also helped create VR curriculum at the Academy of Art University and am a contributing writer to Immersive Shooter. So let's give these guys a round of applause. Got to do the embarrassing part. So we're just going to jump right in. So Dylan, do you want to jump up?
Thank you, Alex. And so my name is Dylan Roberts, and I started Freelance Society around 2013. And so as a journalist, I've covered mainly, let's say, complex countries since 2009. So started really covering Iraq towards the end of the war, the U.S. war. And then we really started getting into VR. My business partner, Christian Stephen, and I, in early 2015, we did a lot of work with Riot, which was acquired by AOL, or Huffington Post, and I guess AOL. And then we started getting more involved in 360 videos. That's kind of our specialty. And we really focus on access into not just countries, but really access into specific stories that make sense in 360. And so you can go next slide if you want. These are just some of our favorite films that we did. Welcome to Aleppo was the first 360 video inside a war zone. And then we did Safe School Nepal, which is about the education system after the earthquake. And then most recently we did one covering Mosul and the medical team inside Mosul, Iraq. And yeah, I think I'll show a clip here.
In addition, while it's true that Iraqi special forces still outnumber ISIS fighters, it's reported that 4,800 Iraqi soldiers have either been injured or killed. To make matters even worse, the conflict has virtually wiped out all formalized medical facilities in Mosul. Instead, medical teams have set up makeshift field hospitals hidden within abandoned houses all over this dense city. As you can see, these hospitals are actually just simple triage centers, equipped with beds, tourniquets, and bandages. Basically the absolute minimum a medic needs to plug up a gunshot or shrapnel wound. And aside from very limited supplies, medical teams also have to contend with ISIS soldiers and informants pretending to be civilians seeking treatment. The guy in the blindfold is an ISIS informant captured by Iraqi special forces.
You can go to the last slide. We did that with the project with Seeker. You can just go Google Seeker VR, and it's probably the latest video. So probably one of the most dumb things you could do is film VR in a conflict zone, just because the cameras and technology for one thing, and a lot of times you're filming and you have to figure out, okay, how can I get out of the shot? So that's always one of the complex problems. So a lot of times when we film, we actually have to be in the shot just for safety reasons. And so we've been working in Iraq, and we'll have about 3 more films coming out this year, ranging from Yazidi women who have taken up arms to fight against ISIS, and we actually did that film with Celine. And we're also focusing on long format VR investigative, so we even have footage going back over a year and a half in 360 video. And we're going to continue to see what happens to the state of the country of Iraq, and we really are interested of how can we do investigative long format 360 pieces. And so yeah, we some of these photos, that's majority is inside Mosul, and some of the cameras I really enjoyed was the Zcam S1, which is like actual all-in-one camera, which was nice. And so just because you have to be so focused on the camera, but you also have to be aware of your surroundings and watch out for landmines and sniper fire, some of the things you have to really watch out for. Is it necessary to film in 360 in a conflict zone? I think there are certain awarenesses, and we're always constantly, do we want to push that boundary? Because when you put on the headset, do you want people to experience that kind of conflict? So those are some of the things that we try to think about when creating the story is, do we want people to see this kind of raw storytelling? But I think it's important to tell these kind of stories.
Yeah. I love how he so calmly says, there's some dangers like stepping on a landmine or avoiding sniper fire. It must be pretty intense when you're out there. Yeah. So I definitely want to talk more. At the end of the panel, I think we should talk more about some of the experiences you have. Is there any experience you'd like to share? Something you've filmed, a scene, maybe this is a clip. Pretty compelling. There's times when there's people firing at you in this video. Do you want to talk about?
Absolutely. Yeah, you actually don't even think about filming. You try to put yourself into the action, and you happen to be filming at that time. So it's not so much trying to find the shot. It's more of how can I get myself into not the action, but we're always in the back of your mind, what's the point of telling the story? and how can we get to these areas to actually film it. And so if you watch the film, you know, if VR can somehow get smell, I think then it's going to be so immersive. It's almost you're actually truly there. So we even filmed like mass graves where you've seen 500 to 600 bodies all in one thing, and then you have to think about, do I really want to show this to people? So there's always so much action going around, but you really have to think, does it make sense to tell the story, or you know, what's your goal?
I'll share something quick that you might not even know, but I was in the military as well. I was in Afghanistan. Wow. And I remember thinking then, one of our missions, we had 30 journalists from every news agency you could imagine come out to this this agricultural center that we were helping to support. And we didn't even make it to the facility, and they had to turn around for logistical reasons, or maybe it was too far, I'm not really sure. But they all had their own stories of what this place was like, even though they never actually went there. And they had pictures, you know, that they zoomed in and they got a picture of it. And so they're like, okay, yeah, we got it, thank you. And one of the first things that I thought of when VR came about, and I'm not a journalist, but was, you know, they couldn't make that up if they were there. They couldn't pretend like they went out to this cultural center. And if they were filming in VR, you know they're there. There's no, you know, when you see this piece and you're like, oh, I'm right there with these soldiers. I'm right here, you know, right down there. People are firing at each other. So
yeah, it's almost true storytelling, because you can't hide the atmosphere. It's the atmosphere what it is. Yeah,
absolutely. So I applaud you for everything you're doing. Yeah, let's go ahead. I'd love to there's a spider like climbing all over the place. It's great. I'd love to talk more when we get done with the panel. Yeah. Let's go ahead and move to Madison. What's that?
Is it cool if I still come up?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to switch computers.
Hey everybody.
Don't mind us.
Well, I can start by telling you a little bit about VR Playhouse while we get this set up. We are a full-service creative studio based in LA. We do VR, AR, and 360 video. We are soup to nuts, so we have the creative section, a post-production, and distribution. We work on all sorts of different media topics, so we've done stuff from Defying the Nazis, which is more of a documentary format, to Reinvent, which was in partnership with USC, which used MRI technology to control the VR actual game experience. And then we'll do like commercial projects like Coach or Red Bull, Jack in the Box. But I'll show you the sizzle. Thank you.
My hands on myself. Pick up, dust them off, put them back up on the shelf. Kiss my little baby girl isn't me. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks. I've been feeling it since 1966. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks. Let me kick it like it's 1986. Might be over now, but I feel it still. Got another mouth to feed. Even with my babies, still mama call the grave digger. Gone with the fallen leaves. Am I coming out of left field? Ooh, I'm a rebel just for kicks now. I've been feeling it since 1966. Might have had your fill, but I feel it still. Ooh,
That song's so hot, right? So we do a lot of commercial projects, and what we do that for is to be able to fund more creative projects too. All of us have a theater and film background, and so when we get a chance to do something more creative, it's an exciting experience for us. And one of the things we worked on was a short film called Girl. It's about a little girl who she's choosing not to speak. She's had some sort of semi-traumatic experience, and her mother is trying to reach out to her and get her to open back up. The topic was or the subject matter was female-based, and our team was very women-focused. Our director, Lauren Ludwig, our producer, Christina Heller, the lead actress is Nell Laveras, and me and Maria Dierloff on the art department. And I feel like this was a really important story to get out right now, especially in VR, where we do need more representation from women to shape this industry. We use the medium to dictate our storytelling. So you'll see in this clip, the camera's actually at a lower angle. So you take the perspective of the child. So we use the camera at a lower angle to be able to have that, like, you're looking up feeling. This lack of agency where you're like looking around, you're not actually having to make eye contact, similar to how a child would act around talking to an adult. And the speech itself is very like lyrical and narrative, kind of reminiscent of what you grew up listening to and people would talk to you or read you stories. So the clip one.
See this, Janie? This is where Mom grew up, and Grandma too.
How do you like it?
There's the piano. That's where Grandma made Mom practice an hour a day.
Didn't do much good, huh?
You should be glad I don't make you do that. Huh, Janie?
Mom brought you here without telling you why. How long do you think you will be here?
Is that a new painting?
You don't like it.
It's a giant crow.
So, you're not talking, huh?
Janie, talk to your grandma. Tell her about the dinosaurs we saw on the side of the road. Yeah, remember?
Mom wants you to speak.
How many were there? Remember they were green? There were so many of them. Tell Grandma. Janie. Janie, you're being rude.
How long has it been?
4, 5 weeks.
Nothing.
Not a word.
So you could see there how we use the medium to make you feel like a kid again and kind of take you through the discomfort of not being able to express yourself in that way. Another way that you can use as an art director to convey story is the actual setting. And before, with traditional film, that's a lot of the director of photography's job. But since it's a 360 atmosphere, a lot of what you're doing is the environment and giving you sort of a vibe rather than an actual like zoom in or wide angle. So in this case, we use the atmosphere of the room to kind of make you feel, again, in that childlike way. You're at like your kooky grandma's house. It's sort of uncomfortable. You're in this strange place. And no matter where you're looking, you're seeing something different and exploring the space similar to how you would as a child. We also used a lot of practical effects to convey these feelings of like maybe being afraid of the dark, or you're in this new place, maybe thinking of nightmares, to kind of speak to the audience inner child.
This is your new room. What do you see? What do you hear?
And he knows about the baby?
Yes, Mom, he knows.
He knows about Janie?
No, but he wouldn't care.
You should call
I
him.
have called him, Mom. He doesn't pick up the phone.
You need to call him again.
No, I've called him 12 times and he doesn't call me back. So,
I just don't accept that.
At night, Mom doesn't come to tuck you in. Are you afraid? If you call for her, will she come? If you call for Dad, will he come?
This one work? Okay. So what you may have not been able to see there is as it gets dark, some of the room starts coming to life. So there's like a rocking horse that's moving and like the door slams and like in that last clip I was actually in the armoire like slamming the door. So it really was a combination of theater and technology meeting and sort of figuring out where we can fit these two mediums together to tell a story.
Thanks, Madison.
Yeah.
One thing I think that I think in traditional film, a lot of filmmakers sort of see the DP as being a little bit more important than the production designer, and in general they should be the same. But I think in general, a lot of times put a lot more importance on the DP, the cinematographer. And in my mind, I feel like in VR, it's sort of the opposite, where you have to light practically in a lot of situations when you're going to be doing shooting cinematic feature or cinematic VR shorts or films or whatever. I think that the production designer and the art direction, it's so important to have somebody who really understands that. And unfortunately, you can't really see the projector that well, but the set design in that is incredible. And every little pixel on the screen is really well thought out, and a lot of the lighting was done practically as well. So. We'll have to come back to that. So the next speaker we have is Najib. So Najib, you want to stay there or here?
Play it.
Okay.
Then go and start talking.
All right. Perfect.
My name's Jack Philo, and it's finally time for me to get my shit together. All right, let's do this. Whoa, who is this magnificent specimen? She's unbelievable. It is only a matter of time. Soon I will move up to take my rightful place next to you, my love. I just have to figure out a way. But then, we will date.
Okay, everyone.
How's it going, guys? So I'm Najib Kuda, the founder and CEO of Endless VR. We are a VR content studio focused on creating content across a number of different genres, but anything that has a narrative is a cinematic focus. That piece, although I apologize for the orientation, was a scripted comedy piece that we did with Oculus Studios that we came out about 2 months ago. And a lot of what we do is really trying to figure out what type of content has the ability to achieve a level of mass consumption. Both myself and my team, we come from the kind of traditional future studio side. So I worked for Sony, for Fox, and for Lionsgate before this, greenlighting and distributing films anywhere ranging from 21 Jump Street through La La Land. And we're really focused on building a comprehensive slate that focuses on what type of content can hit the mass consumer. So whether that's comedy, whether that's thrillers, whether it's action, whether that's sci-fi, building things that have that level of appeal that can appeal to a huge audience and really bring VR more and more into the mainstream. With that particular piece, we wanted to experiment with what scripted comedy really looks like, and see what timing looks like, what kind of beats really hit, and whether jokes work the same way in traditional filmmaking as it does in VR filmmaking. And that's a lot of what we do, is figure out where VR is in the evolution of cinema in terms of what makes sense to port over to VR filmmaking, what makes sense to leave behind, and what that new language can really look like. So with that piece in particular, we definitely went for something that was a whole lot broader than artistic. We went for something that had a level of mass appeal. It was a funny guy from a hit sitcom on CBS and a beautiful girl, and we played through a lot of kind of traditional jokes to see whether it's something that could just be a fun experience in VR. Definitely not something we took Sniper Fire for, so definitely not something as artistic and awesome as stuff you guys make. And we think that's what we were trying to do, is kind of try to find that balance in VR of kind of spreading it out and making lots of different types of content and see what works, things that are deep and interesting, things that are fun and silly, and see how all that stuff really fits into the spectrum of what this business could really be and how we can build a slate that really achieves that. So kind of the way that we're looking at it is how all those things play together with not only genre and tone and focus, but also type, whether things should be passive, whether things should be interactive, whether things should be 360 video, volumetric, whether it should be game engine. We're experimenting with that whole world, because we really want to bring in a lot of true story into that, no matter how we do it. We want people to really put on that headset and have an enjoyable time, have an experience that they can walk out of it and say, like, that was worth the 10 to 15 to 20 minutes I just spent in a headset, and it brought some value to my day, and something that they can enjoy for going forward and really make something like part of their media consumption ecosystem. And kind of the example that I always give when we're discussing concepts internally and figuring out what we want to make next is, if you were to come home after a long day at work and put on a head and decide what you want to do, whether that's watch television, whether it's play a video game or put on a headset, what would warrant you wanting to put on a headset for those 20 minutes and have a fun time? And that's kind of how we look at the type of content that we're making, and really want to bring that kind of cinematic storytelling to make this a true evolution of media consumption and something that can exist within that playing field.
Great, that's awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing for me, people ask me, like, well, what's it going to take for VR to get to the next level? What's it going to take? And one of those things is to have a production company like Endless Media decide, hey, let's make a VR studio and let's start figuring out how do we tell VR stories. It also takes the grassroots, kids from college, like, just scrapping together and doing that. But a big part of it is people who have already told successful stories and do know something about telling stories and also commercial stories, and spending the time and money and the brain power to go, how can we, like you said, how can we take the things that we've learned and apply them, but also what things do we need to toss out?
Yeah.
I think that's a very important point that you made.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the kind of fun part of being in VR right now, is that there's that opportunity to do so many things, especially for a lot of us that come from that traditional future world where the world has been increasingly consolidated into, we make these kind of movies and we don't want to make anything else because this is what works and this is what's successful, especially with the theatrical world kind of with the bottom kind of falling out, and that in movies increasingly hard to turn profitable, that a lot of people don't really have the courage to try different things. And I think VR is kind of that awesome space in the sense that we have a wide scape to try a lot of different things and the opportunity to make different things that maybe we couldn't ever make in the future world anymore.
Yeah, great, thank you. Okay, I will be the next speaker. So, as I said earlier, I work at Jaunt. I have directed and produced a few shows there, but many of them have not been released yet, so I can't talk or show them. But I have a passion project that I've been working on for a few months now, and my DP is in the audience. Megan, can you wave your hand so I can embarrass you? And so I'm going to show you a clip from that and talk a little bit about that. I'm actually going to show this in 360. So hopefully we can see it.
This was the day he figured it out. Who I was, who I am. It didn't last long. It never lasts long. Sometimes he catches me in a lie. I feel bad, but what can I do? When I tell him the truth, it just confuses him, but he's getting worse.
Can't really see much of that, but pretend there's some image there and you'll get the idea. So one of the things I'm going to talk about is, well, basically the main thing I'm going to talk about is sort of directing and lighting for VR. And, you know, there are different opinions on sort of also where's the frame. And so a lot of people say, well, we don't have a frame. And I tend to disagree with that, and I think, you know, when our last panelist gets up, Thomas, he'll talk about that, and he has some tools for that as well. But when I think when most filmmakers are making something in 360, they are framing it. There are visual frames that somebody's going to turn and they're going to land on this frame, and we're going to compose this frame here. So it's, yeah, you can barely even see the screen, but basically I have a equirectangular image here, and then I have sort of the frame. Yeah, you can't see it at all. Nah. I have sort of like the frame that we envisioned when we, you know, when we shot it. So, you know, I think that there certainly is a lot of the composition that we have from traditional filmmaking, rule of thirds, all these sort of things definitely apply in 360. You just have to imagine them in different ways. If you have, you have two characters here, you have to imagine sort of several different frames, but you still have to compose those frames, and you know what art goes in those frames and how the light hits those frames are all very, very important. This may not even be, yeah, you won't be able to see it anyway. I have a set of images here. We'll go ahead and kill the lights. We'll try to see it. I have a few images here. So the final rectangular image sort of looks something like this, and you have a living room over here. You have two actors talking here, and there's one of the actors, this actor here, the same actor over here. And you know, if just this image, it looks like, well, that's just fine. But there's basically we filmed 3 different shots to create this image. So the first one looks something like this. You can see Megan's down here, our DP's here. We're lighting this scene here. I'm here. I'm watching the actors, so I'm not like behind. I'm not in Video Village. I'm not like in another room where I can't see them. I'm in the room watching my actors as they're doing their performance. The DP's watching the lighting as it hits their face, you know, and then we switch that. We shoot the scene over here in the kitchen with the same actress. That's why she can be in 2 places at once. And then last we filmed the living room. So we actually filmed this before the other 2. There was a little bit of light from outside, plus we were shooting the light into it. But so there's 3 pieces. So there's this piece, and that piece, and then we put them together. So we're able to get rid of the living room and the DP and the lighting here. We're able to get rid of myself in this image here. And then we're able to also, you can barely see it, but we're also getting rid of the tripod at the bottom. And then, of course, the final step is the color grade, so the difference in color between the two as well. And all those things have, it's very difficult to do, but the idea is something that's very old. I mean, it's shooting a clean plate, and being able to be behind the camera and be there with your actors. I think it's very important that we're able to be with actors, because I think for me, the most important thing in VR is good acting. So making sure that your actors are true to the story and delivering lines how they should be, is at least as important as it is in traditional media, but maybe even more, because we don't have close-in. We can't really jump into close-ins. We can't really cut and create a performance. It has to be organic and it has to be real. So this film we're finishing it up this week actually, and we'll be releasing it pretty soon. You'll go check it out. But now I want to hand the mic over to Thomas Wallner, who's going to come up here. We're going to switch computers again. I can get rid of this.
No, it's fine. Hi there. Hi. I don't know how much you can see there. If we could take down the lights, that would be great. Wow, I'm screen recording here. I don't mean to do that. Okay, so just a little bit about myself. I've been making films for about 20 years, feature documentaries on various subjects. The last one I did was about aging drag queens and transsexuals in their 80s in Belgium. I'm very specific. I would say that alone qualifies me as a transmedia producer. So I mention that because I think it means I know a thing or two about traditional storytelling or storytelling. And about 4 years ago, and I've worked in interactive media for many years doing interactive storytelling, sort of as a parallel career track. And about 4 years ago, I found myself being one of the directors on a television series about the Arctic, a 10-part series. And then I was also tasked with making an immersive film. It was about 4 years ago. And so when working with 360 Media, it became really apparent to me, at least at that time, that it was a really terrible medium to try to tell a story with, that it was exceedingly difficult to do so. And maybe we'll get into discussing that later, why, so I won't say too much about that. And one of the things that really bothered me was really the lack of a frame, or not, having a hard time framing up a picture. So we did this film called Polar Sea. It was a 25-minute narrative piece, and in it we sort of developed some techniques that I felt were relevant to the medium. So we then went out and actually created a platform that would allow some of these advanced techniques to be applied, and a tool set that would allow you to do that. So let me just show you what that means. I'd like to say that we brought the frame back into this medium, and I think it's actually quite literally true. So I will just show this to you for now. So here is the classic problem. If you just look at this shot for a second, it's a 360 shot from a piece I did called The Edge of Space, together with Jürgen Geertz at Concept VR. There's a cut happening here. The audience looked left and there's a cut. And that detail of this man almost getting caught in a wire and being pulled up into space is important to my story. I wouldn't want people to miss it. Now, the thing is that, some idiot comes along and then starts looking to the right side at a piece of plastic that has nothing to do with my story. and I don't like that. And now this is what the cut looks like. I mean, what is that? It's like having a drunken camera person, and you know, your story basically dies there. So with our player, that's not what happens. It's the only player in the world that does something different. So now let's watch this cut again, and now what you see is this, that basically what we do is we programmatically reorient the sphere to the view that the author wanted the audience to see. We called it forced perspective. I don't know if that's the best name. It's a slightly unfortunate name, actually. It's unfortunate because it implies that something is being forced on the viewer. And it is true that we're forcing a certain angle, but we've been doing it for years and the audience never noticed the manipulation. So it's this beautiful thing where we're giving back control to the filmmaker and taking none of the freedom away from the viewer, which is sort of the ideal combination. And I think it actually changes the way you can approach this medium narratively. For instance, you know, you can take a 360 camera and actually frame it very close to something, like somebody's hands or a detail of a face. I won't say it's like a close-up, but it's a detail. And if you don't have forced perspective, it's very hard to utilize that shot, because in that case, only a small part of the sphere is actually relevant. And if you don't see it because you've missed it because you're looking in the wrong direction, it's very hard to leverage a shot like that. We're also really used to the fact that right now on 360 video, everything is in focus. At our company, we started shooting with macro and total lack of depth of field. And so we did these shots of bees going into a fruit, and the bees are almost as large as the screen that you're seeing. And only that portion of the shot really works. Everything is out of focus. Again, it would be hard to utilize such a shot without forced perspective. The underlying technology that we have developed to do this, that was a difficult part, because you need to be frame accurate on all mediums, on all platforms, on all codecs at all times, or it doesn't work. That frame accuracy allows us to do some other pretty cool stuff that I just wanted to show you quickly. Just give me a second. This is actually 4 years old. This was from the Polar Sea. I was shooting up in the Arctic, and this is a young woman who lives in a place where no trees grow, dreaming of global warming and how it will transform the beautiful north into a Garden of Eden. So let's just see what happens here. So
maybe in 100 more years, there's gonna be trees all over Nunavut.
So that's actually not a 360, it's a stills film. We call this switching. Now watch what happens. So we go through a window, and then when we come out on the other side, we're actually in a 360. So we have this ability to basically switch between two types of media. I'll just show it to you one more time. So we're moving through here, and then I can actually move on the other side. Here's a similar shot, or a similar idea. Here we're with an old Inuit elder and a boat, and then the camera tweens over to him here, and then we basically come close to him in a regular film shot. So we're going from immersive medium right seamlessly to a close-up. Now, I originally invented this whole switching idea because I didn't like the way 360 cameras looked, and I wanted to have that visual fidelity of going close to somebody's face. But it's funny, you intend one thing and then invariably you discover something else. And what we actually ended up doing in the process is actually creating a new form of visual communication that didn't exist until then. So basically this ability to not silo media where you've got 360 here and flat film here, and the two of them have a completely different language, now they can actually be brought together into one construct. And that's a really interesting idea. I believe that the brain is very malleable and accepting if something is unified aesthetically through sound, through a story. We're able to combine that very quickly, and it's a very satisfying process actually. Here is how switching works in VR. It's a sort of a demo piece we did with Werner Herzog. He created a film called The Cave of Forgotten Dreams, which is a film about the Chauvet caves in France, where you see the earliest form of human drawings on them. And in his film, he originally had a scientist sit beside a monitor showing a point cloud of that actual cave. So we created this experience in VR that basically switches from Werner's film into this point cloud, but it's still part of the story. And it's a really wonderful way to create a hybrid kind of storytelling. I'll show you what that looks like.
We have the illusion of movement, like frames in an animated film.
So we're now seeing the 3D traditional film on a virtual screen, and that's still the film, and now the next cut is actually the cut to our 3D 360 point cloud. But we contain it inside the frame so that cognitively it's still a continuation of traditional montage. But what we do then
Painters of the cave
is we actually
seem to speak to
extrude
us
the
from a
image
familiar
beyond the
yet
confines
distant universe.
of the traditional film
But what
screen
we are
and
seeing
allow it to
here
surround the
is
viewer.
part of
And because that
millions of
happens
spatial
seamlessly with the music continuing and the narrative thrust continuing, it actually becomes one kind of experience. And then the trick is to bring the viewer back to the screen where the traditional film continues. And we do that by taking away the light, which means the viewer follows the light, and then they're seamlessly back into the regular film again. So I'd like to maybe get people to think about VR, non-VR, and free themselves a little bit from the shackles of what this form is supposed to be at this early stage, that it can be really anything you want it to be. And that you, in a way, what I'm trying to bridge is the gap between a medium, like all other medium before VR, works on the principle of magical symbolical thinking, where we're basically taking fragments of reality that are assembled through an imaginative process to create a metaphor of reality that exists only in our minds, which is why traditional film is so powerful and engaging, whereas immersive media literally takes you there, but works differently. And I think there might be a way to combine the two that is quite interesting. So, and you can author this all with this tool called Liquid Cinema VR. There you go, shameless plug. Try it out. We made it for you. Thank you. There you go. All right.
Yeah, we're good. Okay, thanks, Thomas. So I think that that opens up, some discussion between the panelists. I think that, when we think of the future of VR, there are a lot of so many different possibilities, so many different things, and I think that, but I think that in the near future of VR, I think that's it. I really think that this really is something that, Dylan can pick up tomorrow and figure out how to use it and start utilizing that in his wartime film. And I think there's a bunch of different applications. I'm sure Tom's could talk about it all day long. But I think one thing that I immediately thought of that it's like is, we'll be able to have shorter edits, shorter cuts, because you can say, okay, we know that when we cut, it's going to land on here, and we can know when it cuts. So I think that's really exciting. I think it's exciting for, obviously not every film needs to be cut. Max and Amy is it's sort of slow and poetic, but, maybe like for instance, your demo reel, you might want to just cut, and just show everything you have in 1 minute. And obviously there's going to be a million more applications. So I want to shut up and hear what some of the other panelists have to say about sort of the future of VR, maybe utilizing what Thomas is talking about, maybe not. Najib, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the future of VR is kind of open to interpretation a little bit, and it can definitely incorporate a lot of those things to really see what people resonate with. I think kind of one of the interesting things right now in VR is we're almost kind of, for the first couple of years of it, where almost all of us in VR kind of experimenting with ourselves and saying like, okay, does this work or does this not work? And as the market's now starting to kind of grow and we're starting to figure out like, okay, how can we really mature the VR ecosystem? We're starting to think about, okay, what can consumers really respond to? What makes sense? What really takes VR out from being something that's run entirely by VC funding or things with internal development, and start looking at what is monetizable in that level, and to that end, what can people really resonate with, what will people enjoy, and what people will watch, and what kind of makes sense to them. And I think it's a lot of those experimentations and seeing what consumers will really like, what consumers will really like, and get to that point where we can now understand, like, okay, this is the right path, and these are the right type of things that we should be making to start making VR a part of our media ecosystem.
Okay. Dylan, Madison, do you guys want to? Dylan?
Yeah. We're good? Okay. Yeah, to me, the future, at least in 360 Journal, is still pretty new. I guess this industry is really still just on the pretty new. It feels like if you've been doing it for over 2 years, you feel like you've been in it for a long time, or it feels like it's been forever. What excites me, it gives journalists a new opportunity to tell stories, which most journalism, freelancers especially, it's wide open, mainly because the equipment is just way too expensive. But it excites me to add another industry for the journalism world, and especially what Thomas was talking about. We're always having DSLRs and shooting and being able to capture a certain detail, especially like interviewing someone's. We love doing close-up interviews. I think that just brings a whole new element to it and makes it even more immersive.
Yeah. Addison, do you have anything?
I think it's also, like, even since we shot Girl, like 360 is sort of, it's not out, but it's a lot of people are more interested in gamified experiences. So I think that what appeals to me in a storytelling aspect is sort of this idea that we all have like micro scripts that we follow all the time. Like when you go to the supermarket, someone asks you how it was, and you say it was good, and then you take out your card and you do the thing, and like you don't even think about doing it. So what if you take those micro conversations that you have every day and change the rule a little bit? Like I was saying the other night, like if you just, I didn't think of a better example since then, but if somebody starts smashing your food once you brought it to the supermarket, and then how do you react to that? So I guess I think that there's going to be a combination of everything. There's going to be the frame and combining the two medium, but there's also going to be AR and mixed reality, and I think it's really hard to come up with a real, this is what it's going to be right now, but I think that it's definitely going to be just changing realities, literally, within a gamified experience.
Right. I keep thinking of like a kind of a visual Darwinism. I always get the sense that that the visual language of traditional film was not invented; it was found, and it's something that utilizes the structure of our brain. So, in other words, you say the word consumer, I'm just going to say brain. It's sort of what sticks because we're able to interpret it with a cognitive apparatus or a perception apparatus that we have. And so I actually think the language of VR already exists, we just haven't found it yet. And it's really a journey of discovery rather than invention.
For sure. Let's see. Don't have too much time left. Let's go ahead and open up for question and answers. So Q&A. Anyone have a? Yeah.
Did everybody hear the question? So the question was, is this tool a good way to combine, I guess I'm going to call it flat film and 360, and is that something one should do, and does one always need such a smooth transition? I don't think you always need such a smooth transition. I think you could even cut from one to the other directly. I think in the end, it's not really about the medium, but it's about the meaning of what you're trying to convey. So if you're in a war zone and somebody hands you a piece of footage they shot on a cell phone of something that's really, really important to your story, I don't think it's even a question. You know, you'd want to utilize it. And I think we just make it easier to do so, because in that case you can use that flat film footage directly. You don't have to burn it into a sphere. You can have it in its full resolution. It'll always be in front of you. It just makes it easier to utilize. And I think it's just amazing how we have the imagination to combine anything. And in fact, we can't help it. You know, if we look at the clouds, we see patterns that we interpret into something meaningful. I think we have a very hard time with chaos. We like to create order, and the way we create order in life is through stories, and that's how we build our memories, and that's how we navigate through life. So I think there are no rules. I think I've seen wonderful pieces that didn't have a single cut in them, and that they were just, you know, a mixture of theater and film. And about the fast cutting, I think, yes, you could cut faster, but one thing that I'd like to maybe say is that right now the player technology tends to think of 360 in non-VR mode when you're using your finger, and 360 on a head-mounted display as the same medium, and obviously it's not, but we're using the same film in both, which is a real shame. Because what happens is that you kind of then create the lowest common denominator to play to the strengths or weaknesses of each medium, whereas really we should be making two films, one for each. And I think I'd like to work on player technology with Liquid Cinema, where it actually plays a different film when you switch into another medium, so it's kind of optimized. So I don't know, there's a lot to think about.
Great. Okay. Do we have any other questions? Oh yeah, yes sir.
Okay. Well, if you think back to like the Wizard of Oz, that's I feel like this is sort of an in-between kind of a product. You know, it's like we're used to a 2D with flat film, like you said, so it's kind of this in-between thing, and you could work with that medium to make your story significant using the combination of the two things to drive your point home.
I wonder sometimes whether we experienced. Of course, there's a total difference between seeing an immersive film and seeing a flat film. But in 1989, there was something called, researchers found something called the boundary, what is it called? It's called the boundary completion illusion. And basically, they put people into a room where there was a window and there was a tree outside. And then a couple of days later, they gave them a piece of paper and said, can you draw the tree that you saw? And everybody draws a complete tree. But nobody saw a complete tree because it was cut off by the frame of the window. Or another experiment, you give people a photograph of a picket fence and a bunch of garbage cans, and it's cropped so the top of the picket fence is cut off, like the top of the fences. And then basically 30 minutes later, they give them that cropped photo and the uncropped photo and ask them, which photo did you actually see? And everybody shows the uncropped one and says, why are you showing me this weird cropped photo? Because in the meantime, the brain has filled in the missing pieces. So I think what we have to tell ourselves is that when we watch traditional film, there's a highly imaginative process happening where we're filling in the rest. We're actually seeing a 360. Our brain is creating it for us behind us, and we're filling in the gaps between the cuts, and that's what makes it so compelling. I don't even know why I'm saying this, but so I think there's a mixture of suspension of disbelief and immersion that we can mix all up into something else and just sort of figure it out. Like, I don't know, I don't have the answer, but it's certainly worth experimenting with.
Okay. I think we're actually officially out of time. Can we do another question? I don't see. Well, we'll do another question. Yes, sir. You say you teach at the Academy of Art. Yes, sir. Do you have reference? How do you teach VR? It's a good question. I'm still figuring it out. No, I mean, we are, so there are several classes. The intro class is very much, I mean, day one, we give them a Ricoh Theta, we give the students a Ricoh Theta. And the intro class is very much, it's sort of, lets the students explore a lot. So we show, every class will show examples from current 360 films and, what works, what doesn't work, and we'll have a discussion about it. It's not that there is one thing that works and one thing that doesn't. It's a discussion. Some people find, one film to be powerful, others think it's lame, and but just sort of discovering the cinematic language. Some of the other classes are more technical, more stitching, shooting and stitching, like the technical part of it. But I mean, it's really something, and that's sort of the exciting thing, is that it's sort of developing as we go along. And I mean, even with some like the Growth, for instance, is a great film to study as far as what happens when we do camera movement and implementing these different tool sets, different cameras, now volumetric video, like how it's sort of an evolving thing. Does that answer your question or no? All right, sounds good. Yeah, I think we're officially out of time, but we're all here for questions as well, so we'll be hanging out. Please come talk to us, and thank you for coming to our panel. Another round of applause for these great panelists.